Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs. It is week 9 of the college football season. Tyler, still, the last week before we get to November, and always, that's when we really start to separate the pretenders from the contenders. We've seen a bit of that separation already try to happen, but another big week for everyone to prove themselves. Should be a great week, as if any week's a bad week.
Yeah, can't go wrong with the weekend of college football. It doesn't matter, what's at stake. It's always good when college football's around.
Absolutely. And so before we get into this, as always, feel free to like the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it really does mean a lot to us. So Tyler, let's just get right on into it. The first game, the biggest game, the big one Saturday night in Aggie land down at College Station. LSU and Texas A&M, a top 15 matchup. And Tyler, this is an interesting one because we've talked about LSU quite a bit. We mentioned Texas A&M a few times before. These are two teams that really feel like they're getting into their peak form. They have hit that midseason stride. They are both exactly where they want to be.
Yeah, they are, and this is a monumental clash. We kind of touched on in the recap that this was a big one coming up, just because it decides kind of who's at the top of the SEC standings, right? So both teams are going to know that's on the line, and who emerges in top form. This could be, I don't know, it's kind of maybe one of those sloppier games, right? But you're going to see, I think, overall some good football.
Absolutely. Texas A&M, the 2.5-point favorite in this one. That has stayed the same as of the Tuesday night when we're recording this. Everything has stayed fine on the betting line there. And the reason why this is such a big one, Tyler, you can see it on the standings here. These are the only two teams undefeated in conference play. Someone is getting knocked down a peg, and whoever wins this, as of the moment, technically, whether you believe it or not, would be the front runner the rest of the way for the SEC.
What a weird statement, Cade. That just feels chaotic.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't make any sense, but that's the world we're living in right now. Someone's got to be 7-1. If A&M wins, they're 5-0 in conference play already. That would definitely feel well for them, after year of having to deal with the same old. Mike Elko comes back. Now he's the head man, and he'd have A&M rolling, and that's the one thing that's always been concerning for Texas A&M. If they get someone who knows what they're doing down there consistently year in and year out, you'll see bigger games like this. You'll see crazier environments like that down in Aggie Land. Not like it's a non-crazy place already. It's already a hostile environment, but A&M, this is kind of one of those statement games again. They already had one with Missouri. They blew them out of the water. You get another one here, and Tyler, to me, the big matchup here kind of been the main story for LSU. Every time I seem to talk about them, can that defense play well? Can they hold on against the Texas A&M offense that's not going to wow you in the passing game? Connor Wegman's not going to do a whole lot there, but where Texas A&M thrives is running the ball. Le'Veon Moss, 8 touchdowns already on the season. Amari Daniels has 5. This is an Aggie team that absolutely loves to pound the rock and just control the game that way. And of course, A&M, a great defensive team as well. Can LSU get their run game going? Caden Durham's been the big star. He had a massive week last weekend in Fayetteville. I think he has to continue to be going. And Garrett Nussmeier didn't have a touchdown last week. That wasn't a problem because LSU was able to play physical, control the game there. That is going to be a huge deal in this one. You talk about the physicality last week. That definitely is going to continue for both LSU and Texas A&M.
Yeah, it is, and the spotlight I think is definitely all those quarterbacks in this matchup for me. Yes, the LSU defense. You also kind of want to make sure that they are able to handle things, but I have no concerns given what happened last week going into this one that they could kind of replicate a strong performance. Just because, like I said, A&M's not going to wow you necessarily with what they do, so it's kind of similar to what and I would argue Arkansas maybe has a little more creativity in their offense, right? But it might be one of those kind of old school SEC matchups. You think 6-3 Bama LSU. I don't think it'll be that crazy, but it definitely might be a more low scoring affair just on the looking at it from the outset.
Yeah, I don't think we're going anywhere near that 2011. We need overtime for someone to score 9 points type of deal. But I definitely get where you're going. I feel like this is going to be a defensive game. I'm 100% with you on that. And I feel like that's where Texas A&M really wants this to be as well. If they can make this a defensive game, that's right in their wheelhouse. They're at home. They'll have momentum from the jump. If they can come out and, lay that first punch like they did against Missouri early in the game, go out, hammer them, see how LSU gets up and responds. If you're LSU, it's the same way. You're going to have to ride the first few minutes of the game. You got to remember, this is A&M's biggest game of the year so far. I would argue it's bigger than the Notre Dame game was at the beginning of the season now. And you've got to ride with it. There are going to be a few punches, a few waves to deal with, but I think LSU, they've been in this environment before. They did it at Arkansas last week. They did it against Ole Miss 2 weeks ago. They are battle tested for this type of game. It should be an absolute classic.
It should, and you mentioned who establishes the first hit. Can A&M replicate what they did against Missouri in that sense? Um, Man, they're going to have that environment behind them, like you mentioned. I just think LSU, they might be a little tougher than Missouri in terms of being able to withstand that punch. So,
Just a little bit.
really curious to see how the adjustments go. Right, these are two coaches that I think are well versed in being able to adapt within a game. As much as you might not think that of Brian Kelly, he actually does a pretty good job of that and gets his staff to do so. And Mike Uncle, I mean, gosh, what a great job he's doing this year with this team. Scary to think that, hey, get a competent coach like you mentioned earlier in Aggieland, it might get real scary there for a bit. So um, I think this one does come down to some of those adjustments, right? We mentioned the defense and, who kind of sets that tone early. How are they going to be able to, kind of box in the opposing offense? Absolutely going to be a big question.
Yeah, and this feels like one to me at least that if this would be on the road, I'd be way more inclined to pick LSU in this one. I think both teams are right at about even, but being at home, I like A&M to win this game. I think they get the job done. I think the run game gets going early for the Aggies. Connor Wigman doesn't have to do a whole lot, but when he's able to make a big play, I think he'll step up to it. And I like Texas A&M to keep on rolling, and we have to talk about a first place all by themselves fighting Texas Aggies, Tyler.
Wow, what a world that would be. I do think this might just be a game of, like you said, if whoever's the home team wins, right? Just because of two phenomenal atmospheres and two that are very hard to overcome, whether it be Death Valley, whether it be Aggieland. It's tough to escape those pressures. So I think late in the game, this is probably one, like I said, A&M finds a way to pull out. I can see that and get that big win. And like, oh man, I can't imagine waking up knowing that the reality is there that hey, Texas A&M sits alone atop the SEC standings.
I mean,
Oof,
it'd be a head scratcher for everybody, but if you think about it, I
oof.
mean, that's what happens when you're a good team. That's what happens when you have some of that competency. I think it's going to be a massive week for Texas A&M, and we're like you said, on Sunday we're going to be back here having the conversation about is Texas A&M really a top 10 team? Are they a playoff? Not only a contender to make the playoff, are they a contender to maybe take that next step already? That might be a conversation we have to have depending on how this one goes.
Yeah, a lot of intrigue in that in terms of what's the emerging areas. Here's one for you in case A&M wins. If you're a publisher out there on a newspaper, I want the credit for this. Fisher collected checks, Elko cashes them in. That
There
could
you
that
go.
could be the headline right there on a Sunday Monday, if you will, when we look back on this game.
Absolutely. It should be a fun one, though, for the Saturday night game on ABC. Now let's go back a little bit. What'll be earlier in the day on Saturday to 2:30, in a game that I think not a lot of people are going to talk about, not a lot of people are going to think about, and there's a reason why. Oregon is playing Illinois. It's a top 20 matchup. You'd think it would be a big deal. It's going to be middle of the day on CBS, but Oregon's a 21.5 point favorite in this game. And I think that says a lot more about how confident people are in Oregon to continue to just keep on rolling and get their job done. Their quest for the undefeated season looks pretty good now that they've conquered Ohio State. They survived not really a trap this year, but they are able to, after that on a short week, go blow up Purdue on the road. And now you've got Illinois here. If you can complete this 3-game stretch here of, giant game, weird trap, big game again, Illinois, they're going to be hungry for a win. This is a Brett Bielema coach team that they're going to bring that old school Big Ten style. This is going to be one of those weird games that don't be surprised if you're looking at it and going, what do you mean Oregon only has 14 points in the first half? Dang, they don't look like they're playing well. That's the type of game Illinois wants to get you into. They have a good defense. They have a strong run game. Luke Altmaier, I don't know how many times we've said it on this show already this year, Tyler. He's a game manager. He's not going to make too many big mistakes. But if Oregon's able to jump on him early, we know this offense could put up points in a hurry. Dylan Gabriel, a Heisman contender right now. Jordan James is going to be one of the guys I'm excited to see how he plays in this game. Because if he can break a big run or two early, you start to go right at the point of attack against Illinois' front seven. That is going to be the main key to me that Oregon can get this job done and turn it into that blowout that a lot of people seem to think is going to happen this weekend.
Yeah, and I when we were kind of looking forward a little bit on the recap, I was like, ooh, this could be a fun trap, Illinois, here we go. But the more you look at Oregon and what they're doing, Cade, the talent's there on paper, and it's starting to really actualize on the field, it seems like, on all phases. So I worry that, yes, Illinois, like you pointed out, going to try and make this a rock fight, essentially. They want this one ugly. They want this one almost boring, in a classic Big Ten style. I just don't know if they can contain what Oregon's got. That's the big question on my mind. Can Illinois find a way to slow down the Ducks?
And that's the thing. I think they can slow Oregon down for a while. It's just I don't think they can do it the entire game. I think Oregon has too many weapons that Illinois hasn't had to really deal with a whole lot this year outside of, Penn State, Nebraska for a while at times. That Purdue game got interesting late at the end. If Illinois gets in trouble, if Oregon's able to get any big play, whether it be, pass game or run game, it won't matter. If Oregon's able to break that dam early, this thing could get really ugly, and everyone goes, okay, Oregon is unopposed the number one team in the country. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They have the potential to show that this week. I think at the end of the day, it won't matter if they truly show it or not. I think a win here is good enough to prove that again to people. I like Oregon to get the job done. Don't know if they'll cover that just because 21.5, that is a large enough spread that I could see, maybe a backdoor cover for Illinois to only get beat 35-14 when the second stringers are in at the end of the game. But I think Oregon handily gets the job done.
Yeah, probably so. And, like you said, a win's good enough in this matchup, right, to say, okay, they are legit. But I do think for Oregon, they've got to realize it's also a chance to make a big statement. Like I said, if they come out dominate, people are going to go, oh, okay, these guys are serious, So I think that might weigh on a guy like Dan Lanning's mind because we've seen him have that type of fire. Think back to the Colorado game, basically telling those guys, hey, they're posers. We're going to go show that they're posers. And they did that. So don't be surprised if you see some fire message from him if you're watching, the game coverage and they go back and look that peek in the locker room or whatever pregame.
Absolutely. It should be a intriguing one to say the absolute least, middle of the day on CBS there. But Tyler, the other mid-afternoon game going back over to ABC, the SEC on ABC, going to have one of the weirder games in terms of what it looks like now compared to what we all thought it would be even a few weeks ago. Missouri and Alabama is still a ranked matchup. It's still a top 25 game. But if you would have told me Missouri would be coming into this with the better record than Alabama, I would have thought, okay, Missouri's 7-0. They've won every game on their schedule. Alabama maybe lost to Tennessee or Georgia. Well, Missouri has a loss. They're 6-1. Alabama has the big question marks of 5-2. What are you going to do? We asked this question, or at least I did, a few weeks ago when South Carolina came to town, and it was an early game there. How does Alabama get up for that one after a loss? And I can't believe it, Tyler, but I'm going to have to ask the exact same thing here. How does Alabama get up for another big game against a top 25 opponent in Missouri that has had a lot of struggles of their own, and we'll get to that in a moment? but can Alabama rise up to the occasion yet again and finally have that game where they put their foot down and remind everyone who Alabama is?
Yeah, but does a big win over Missouri in the spot really prove anything? That's what's kind of in my mind, because to be quite honest, as we've talked about previously, not so sure Missouri's not fraudulent to a degree, right? Uh, so if Bama rolls in, blows them out, everybody's just going to go, oh, Missouri is not really that good. They've had an easy schedule, benefited from it. Um, their best instance of showing something might be the fact that they survived Vandy, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to say, but that might be the case. So, I man, I don't know if a win for Bama does much. A win for Missouri would be huge because obviously it keeps you right in that mix of one-loss teams, at least conference-wise, to potentially vie for the conference championship game. But boy, Kate, could you imagine another loss for Bama in this scenario?
And I
We
think
might see the first ever head coach fired, only having 3 losses in his first season, and it pretty much all until the last loss being a top 25 team. That would be wild.
that would be. I don't think we're that far down the stretch that Bama's. I mean, people are going to be
Oh,
upset. I
I
get
don't know.
people being
It,
genuinely upset. I get that because
it's a
Alabama.
really spoiled fan base, Cade.
It
I'm not
is.
just talking with the fans. I'm talking at the top.
I hear you, but I think it's one of those you kind of have to expect, not a drastic drop off, obviously, but you have to expect some with, the
Why?
great.
What did they lose?
They
What did they
lost the
lose? They
greatest
brought back
coach of
Jalen
all
Milroe.
time. That's what they lost. They lost Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time. When you lose a guy like that, even going to Kalen DeBoer, who I think is a good coach, you can't expect to jump in knowing, okay, everyone's been gunning for you for a long time. This is the best chance that you're going to get from everybody to beat you. I at least personally expected some drop off from Alabama this year. I didn't expect it to be
Yeah.
lose to Vanderbilt level drop off, but Tennessee game, Georgia game, those were 50-50. We've talked about both of those where you didn't know if Alabama was going to play 100%. I think this game presents that challenge again. Alabama's run defense is still not good. It's not great, not good, it's nothing but bad right now. Tennessee proved that last week. Dylan Sampson ran all over him. Missouri has that opportunity again. If they can get Nate Noel going, if they can get Marcus Carroll going, Missouri will have a shot in this game, in theory. And that's the interesting thing. Alabama's a 13.5-point favorite. Missouri is not great. They're 6-1, but as we've talked about, you've had the battle with Auburn. That was a weird game until the end. The double overtime with Vanderbilt, which looks a lot better than it did, a month ago when that game happened. The holding on for dear life against Boston College, of course, the big one of getting blown out at Texas A&M. I still feel like the ability to be a competitive game is there, and that would be a huge mark again on Alabama. That just what are you doing? How are you allowing this to be close? But I think if they can come in and take care of business and beat them like Texas A&M did, we're talking a 30, 35 plus point game. I think that would be enough to finally realize, okay, Alabama knows what they're doing here. This is still Alabama at the end of the day. The talent's there. But the interesting thing also, Tyler, and I want to go back to your point about kind of, what happens, people are panicking on the Alabama side. I think we kind of have to go back and look at some of the end of Nick Saban's tenure there. Just a little bit. And not to say this is, anything on Nick Saban or anything like that, but just kind of looking at some of the games they played late in his last year or two there, you could start to see some of those cracks forming a little bit. They weren't massive, but you could, you have your Iron Bowl games where you're having to pull miracles out against, 6-6 or 5-7 caliber Auburn teams. That you expect that. It's the Iron Bowl. It's weird, but losing at Tennessee, starting to see more and more people lose their cool. Alabama players just kind of having the ability to get bailed out by whether it be Bryce Young, whether it be Jalen Milroe at times. That was already happening for Alabama. That's why this doesn't shock me as much to see Alabama at 5-2. I kind of expected this would happen at some point. Maybe not, like I said, lose to Vanderbilt level bad, but I feel like it was already starting to roll a little bit downhill. That chance for acceleration's there, but I don't see it happening yet. I don't think we're in fire a guy if he loses 3 games this year territory. I think that's a little ridiculous.
Is it though? I mean, and I like your point though, because I do think you brought up something interesting that, and same as Nick Saban's not catching any flack for it, right?
Exactly.
Because he's Nick Saban, so there's no blame there. When there might be some blame need to be shared, because yes, I agree with your point that you could see some inklings of okay, Bama's not as sharp as they usually are. We're not as dominant, this, that, and the other. We're not as disciplined, right? And that did come under Nick Saban's tenure. So I actually very much like that point. But we are not talking about a reasonable fan base. We talked about this stat on the recap. This is the first time in 16 seasons an Alabama fan base has experienced two losses before November. And not only that, first time Alabama leadership has experienced that
Yeah.
in terms of the university. They've been riding high on the hog for nearly 2 decades. You do not get used to losing quickly.
Exactly. And
You don't.
I agree with that. I think there are definitely a lot of people out there that are going to be super upset this entire season. Even if they go 10-2 at this point, people are going to be really bummed out that they lost 2 games. You can say that's a very blue blood problem, and it is. It's a very,
Yeah,
very
problem.
yeah, it's one of those, you've got to be in a very big position of privilege to have the ability to complain about, dang, we only won 10 games this year. Man, we didn't
Right.
get we weren't a top 8 team in the playoff. What's going on here? What are we doing? Where did Alabama football go? But I think it's just, DeBoer will be the guy, I feel like. It's hard to follow in the footsteps of an amazing, legendary figure like Nick Saban. I think if he doesn't get there, obviously they'll pull the plug on him in a year or two. Obviously, Alabama's not going to accept 9-3 or 8-4 forever. But all I say to that is be wary of the tale of Nebraska. Nebraska did the exact same thing in the early 2000s. They pulled the plug too early because they were only winning 9 or 10 games. You make 1 or 2 more bad hires and everything can go south for a while. Now, Alabama obviously will have a little bit more name recognition and access to easier recruiting areas, but at the same time, as much as hard as it is to say, don't jump the gun just yet. Don't bury Kalen DeBoer for what still is a great Alabama football team.
I mean, I like the balanced take, Cade. I really do. I
Yeah,
like the common sense. But it's college football. We know
I
that has
know.
gone out the window. It's no longer
I'm
allowed. It
saving I'm
hasn't been
saving my
allowed. So.
ridiculously for the next game we're going to talk about. That's what I'm saving
Oh,
it
okay.
for. Okay,
Well,
and
then let's get to it.
yeah, I'll
I'll
say
be
we're
here.
going to get to that next game because it's one that I'm looking very forward to. I know that's not proper English, but I don't care because it's Texas versus Vanderbilt. Middle of the afternoon on the SEC network, 3:15. What happened the last time Vanderbilt played at 3:15 Central Time on the SEC network? They beat Alabama. Now they're playing Texas. Texas is 18.5-point favorites in this game. And Tyler, I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. I'm not gonna. This isn't gonna pop up on Upset Watch for one reason that I think Vanderbilt already had that big game. We saw them struggle against Ball State last week. That was a back and forth game that Vandy had to fight and pull away in the fourth quarter. But it would not surprise me if Vanderbilt gets up for this first time they're in the top 25 since the 2013 postseason when James Franklin was the coach there. The last time Vanderbilt was ranked in the middle of the season, you'd have to go a long way back. We're talking a whole long way. I don't know if either of us were alive the last time that happened because Vanderbilt is legitimate this year. They are a good team. They're not a great team. They're not an elite team, but a good team at home can beat a great team. It all depends on which Texas shows up. This is not a sentence I thought I'd be saying 2 weeks ago. But if Texas comes out and they're slow and they're hungover from getting just wailed on by Georgia for a while, Vanderbilt has the potential to beat them, Tyler. Vanderbilt can absolutely use the same game plan, try to slow this game down, control the clock, let Diego Pavia do his thing, let the system work out, and we could be talking about another monumental upset in Nashville. Maybe the goalposts go down and into the Cumberland River again. It very well could happen. It's going to be a weird game, and it all kind of depends on which Texas we see.
Yeah, and this is similar to we talked about that Purdue Oregon game, right? Where okay, Oregon's coming off huge win. Yeah, Purdue's not good, but you got to come out and still play on the road, weird spot. And they answered that. Texas has got the same challenge, albeit with a much better team compared to what Oregon had to play. And to answer your trivia, if you will, about the Vandy last time they were actually ranked in the regular season,
The
that
regular
would
season.
be, yes, in the regular season twice, 2013, 2012. They were final rankings in the top 25.
Yeah, I
You
was
have to
say.
go back to the 2008 season
Okay,
for
so it
them
was when I was
to
alive. I just
actually be
wasn't
able
paying
to.
attention to college football at that time because I was just in first grade, so that makes sense.
Yes,
There we
and
go.
they were.
Okay. I thought I had
And
read
here's the
somewhere since
wallow
like the
part.
80s or something like that, but oh well.
Well, I was going to say that the gap between 2008, you have to go all the way back to 1984.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
By the way, that 2008 Vanderbilt team only finished 7-6. Started strong, fell off late in the season, and before 84, you have to go all the way back to 1958.
There you go. So we're seeing that kind
Rankings have
of
been far and few in between.
yeah, I was say you get these once every 20 to 30 year type Vanderbilt teams that show up. And Texas is going to have to run into one of them. And I'm really intrigued to see how this game goes, Tyler, because I feel like the upset formula is there. If Texas gets off to a slow start again, which we've seen the past 3 games for them now, Vanderbilt can capitalize on it. They really can. I think if they come out strong, they're at home, which, granted, unfortunately for them, they don't get home field advantage very often, simply due to how many people invade their stadium. It's going to be fun. I think Vanderbilt has a real puncher's chance here, Tyler. If they can just keep that run game going, continue to slow it down like I've been talking about, this is the system Vanderbilt wants to continue to use to their advantage. And Texas, just with how shaky they looked against Georgia, Quinn Ewers is going to have to step up and have a big day. Wisner's going to have a great game and great run game. A good rushing day for Texas is going to happen. He's going to be the main guy to do it. The big plays are going to have to be made for Texas because if they don't, we could be looking at an ugly game that is favoring Vandy going into the fourth quarter.
And had Vandy not already beat Bama, and not so much beat Bama, but did it in a way where they had Jalen Milroe, really almost confused that entire game, right? So that could be easily applicable, I think, to Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning for that matter, should Ewers struggle enough to have to pull again. Because those are two guys that are not quite athletically gifted like Milroe. Arch can scoot. We've seen it. He can
Yep.
move. But like I said, for Texas, they definitely need to establish that run game early. Because if not, man, it could lead to some weird sequences for the Longhorns.
Absolutely. And I think Texas at the end of the day does win this game. I'm not going to go full on upset Vandy's going to win this thing. But, as much as I'd like to see that happen, I do think Texas is going to get the job done. I just think it's going to be a closer game than that 18.5 suggests. I feel like this could be one of those 42-28 type of deals where you just look at it and you kind of start thinking, how did Vanderbilt score 28? Well, they did put 40 on Alabama, and Texas is still kind of getting to those one of their few challenges of the year. So I think there's a potential for this one to be very fun, Tyler.
I we might save it to the picks. I think Vanderbilt gives themselves a shot at the end of this game.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to lean in on upset, but I agree. Think they should at least cover and probably make it interesting.
Yeah, it should be a good one to say the absolute least on the SEC network. But Tyler, we've got one more kind of funky game to talk about. It's Notre Dame and Navy, the early game on ABC. Notre Dame 12.5-point favorites. And usually we wouldn't talk about a Notre Dame Navy game other than, hey, it's triple option week for Notre Dame. They got to deal with a weird rushing attack. That always is a fun talking point when these games happen. But this is a completely different Navy team. This is not that type of year. Navy 6-0. It's been since 1979 that they've been 6-0. It's been a long time for the midshipmen. They are playing this game at MetLife Stadium. This is a neutral game up in East Rutherford, technically New Jersey, home of the New York teams. I will never understand why they had allowed them to do that, but oh well. Navy, a top 5 team, number 4 rushing offense in the country, 275 yards on the ground every single game, number 6 in total offensive efficiency. This is a Navy team that really knows what they're doing, and it all starts with Blake Horvath at quarterback, 20 touchdowns on the year, 10 passing and 10 rushing. And really the question of the game is going to be what happens when Navy's rushing attack meets that Notre Dame defensive line and linebacking core. That is going to be where the game is won or lost for Notre Dame, because you have to stay disciplined when you play Navy. And that's something that I believe Notre Dame can do. But of course, the main question is, will they?
Yeah, and you know the old saying, Cade, this ain't your grandpa's team, or this ain't your grandpa's so-and-so. Well, this is your grandpa's Navy team because it's been that long since they've been good. So, but, hey, this is a really fun watch if you have the time, I think, is what this game amounts to. And the best part for Navy, there's not much you lose here if you do lose, as long as you don't get blown out, right? You go out there, you show that you could compete with a Notre Dame, who right now is tracking to be in the mix for the college football playoff. Uh, then you get yourself what we call those good losses on a resume, especially if you turn around and make your case in a hypothetical title game against Army in the American Athletic Conference, right? So for Navy, not much to lose, Cade. That's, I think, going to be the fun part of this game. They're going to try to play free and just play their style and see if Notre Dame could respond.
Absolutely. This does feel like a game where all the pressure's on Notre Dame. Navy, like you said,
100%.
this doesn't bother them. If they lose, oh well. Their main dream of winning the conference and making the playoff is still there. Now, a win would obviously go a long way towards making the playoff,
Sure.
even without that conference championship qualifier and all those other things. But Notre Dame, it's just, I want to see how their offense plays too. I know the defense will be the big scenario there, the big talking point about, having to deal with Navy's rushing attack. But this is a Notre Dame offense that at times looks solid. It's getting better every single week, but it still worries me when you have, a game against the Georgia Tech where they're able to have a 7-minute drive, eat up time, and your offense has to take a while to get that rhythm going, because it eventually got going against Georgia Tech and they were able to handle that game absolutely fine. But against a team like Navy, who's going to want to do that in 7, 8, 9-minute drive, if they can really get it going, you have no main opportunity to establish rhythm. This has the potential, like we talked about with Texas and Vanderbilt, this could be one of those games you look at and go, it's the fourth quarter and it's a one-possession game. Oh, I got to tune into this. Well, I got to see what Notre Dame does now. It's going to be a great game. I really do believe Navy's going to throw everything at Notre Dame. It's going to be a fantastic way to start your day.
Have multiple screens ready. Just saying.
Absolutely. But when push does come to shove here, Tyler, I think Notre Dame's defense is good enough to shut Navy down long enough to get the job done. Yeah, it'll be a lower scoring game. I can see this being one of those 24-17 type deals where Notre Dame just does enough to get a big win over a great Navy team. Great by Navy standards, especially.
I could see, and I might lean for the fun of it towards the upset pick, because you've mentioned some of those flaws for Notre Dame, right? Where you
Yeah.
kind of get concerned where, Georgia Tech is not operating on the level that Navy is, and they were able to have some of that success playing the ball control. Yeah, Notre Dame, eventually overcame it, but that was a Georgia Tech team that lost some of its, punch, so to speak, by way of injuries and whatnot. So, especially at the quarterback position. So, can a more well-oiled machine take advantage of that and kind of, replicate that blueprint Georgia Tech laid out? Maybe, maybe. I'm intrigued. I think Navy's got a real shot to really stick around and give themselves a look at maybe stealing this one.
Again, and that's why I like Navy to cover in this one. I think the 12.5, you take that for the midshipmen. But I just think Notre Dame is going to find a way to get this one done. We'll have to see in a few weeks when Notre Dame plays Army, because it will be almost talking about word for word the exact same points there. But for now, I like Notre Dame in this one. But Tyler, we've got to finally move on to upset alert, the fun little segment we do here where there are 3 different types of upset alerts, at least the way I do things. There's the upset advisory, the watch, and the warning. Advisories usually conditions could occur that an upset may or may not happen. An upset watch is you've definitely got to keep your eye on it. An upset appears possible, and then the upset warning is an upset is occurring or it is probable, meaning you're calling the upset to happen. That's really where I put things there in terms of upsets. We're going to start with Penn State and Wisconsin because I've got an upset advisory for this one, Tyler. I think Penn State, you're going into Camp Randall Stadium. It's a big game for Wisconsin. Night game, never an easy place to play. The Badgers have a bit of confidence. 3 straight games. Their defense has gelled really well. That offense is coming together. One of the main guys to keep an eye on, Tawee Walker, someone we have experience watching at Oklahoma last year, the transfer from there. He has been just bulldozing people the last 3 weeks. Just if he can find a way to break 3 or 4 tackles on a run, he's going to do it. He's one of those kind of guys that you can give him the ball 20, 25 times a game, and he's just going to start going off on people. He has that playmaking ability to him. Penn State's defense, though, has the ability to step up and contain Wisconsin. If you remember, they're still dealing with that main injury. You've got Braden Lockett, the quarterback there. It's going to be fun to see how Penn State tries to deal with this. Do you just try to 100% clamp down on that run game? And oh, well, if you get beat over the air, if it happens, it happens. How do you try to deal with Wisconsin there? I know Penn State obviously coming off the bye week, so they've had some time to get rested and prepared for this one. And Penn State, they've got some good offensive weapons as well. Drew Aller, quarterback, if he wants to go to someone, he's got maybe the best tight end of the Big Ten, especially when you're coming off, that amazing 17 reception game he had against USC. Tyler Warren's going to make a big play or two, and 2 great running backs in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. This could be a pretty fun game, and Vegas seems to agree. Penn State only a 6.5-point favorite in this one. I think an upset advisory, at least the ability for an upset to potentially happen is there. I know that's a long-winded sentence to say, but that's kind of what that means.
I will say this. I could see all the ingredients, right? You pointed out a lot of good things about Wisconsin has finally gotten back to maybe playing some Wisconsin football over the last few weeks and really starting to feel themselves in terms of that. But Cade, with the way Penn State handled that trip to USC, to me, that tells me, okay, this is maybe a different Penn State team. I can see why you put this on the list. I really can. But I just feel Penn State might come in here and slap around Wisconsin. This might be one of those deals where Penn State got over that big hurdle, right, against USC. Knowing that was a long road trip. You had the bye week to look back, make some improvements. And yes, tough environment, night game, all that. But this might be where Penn State really lays it down and really kind of gets maybe Ohio State on notice coming in to that game November 2nd.
And that's the other part for me. Does Penn State get caught looking ahead to that game? I don't think you do because of what Wisconsin's represented for so long. All these kids and coaches and everything, they know what Wisconsin can be. They know what Camp Randall is. This is no slouch of a team. There's still a 5-2 Badger squad that you have to deal with. I don't think that happens, but there's the slight chance you start to think about, okay, we're playing Ohio State next week. We got to, that's already, top 5 matchup looming on the horizon. Going to be the big noon kickoff game. Going to have all the hype there for that one. Penn State's still in that 3-team race for first right now. You've got to stay close with everyone. Indiana and Oregon technically undefeated with you. It's a half a game ahead if you want to think about it, 4-0 versus 3-0. But it's going to be a fun one. I think this will be an interesting night game. It's only an advisory because Penn State should hold on in theory. Nothing too crazy should happen, but conditions are there for something weird to go wrong. And that's why I think it's a good pick for advisory.
I agree.
But the next one we've got to get to, BYU and UCF, the only other game I've got on upset alert this week. It's been 4 straight losses for UCF. It has been an unbelievably stressful time in the program. It really has for Gus Malzahn. You've had people not threatening, I guess you could say in a way, just quitting the team or playing their 4 games, opting out. You've had to juggle quarterbacks around. You've had to do all sorts of crazy things, but you're at home at the bounce house in an afternoon game where BYU does not play as well in afternoon and morning games as they do at night. That's just how BYU's been. They have the power of the moon on their side. It's a BYU team that is coming off a not miraculous, but a magical win over Oklahoma State on Friday night, the 38-35. Just come from behind, back and forth the entire time. UCF's coming off the opposite side of that. They played what, honestly, Tyler, might have been their best game of the season against Iowa State, which is crazy to say that your best game of the season was a loss at Iowa State.
Loss, yeah.
But Iowa State is that good. UCF had them on the ropes for most of the game. And what I'm really intrigued to see is that BYU last week, when they played Oklahoma State, they were gashed by Ollie Gordon and Garrett Rangel in the first half. Oklahoma State was able to throw some read option concepts in there. Ollie Gordon finally started to look like himself again. BYU struggled to contain them. UCF has that same caliber of back with RJ Harvey, who is a phenomenal guy to just have to deal with. It's a defender's nightmare trying to get him down. And UCF has that quarterback change. They went to Ja'Curry Brown, and he ran for over 100 yards. UCF ran for over 300 yards on Iowa State. And Iowa State is a fantastic defense, especially by their standards. They've been one of those up and down. They've been playing some great, solid football this year. So I think for BYU, they've got to be able to find a way to contain that. This is a UCF team that wanted to run the ball anyway. And now with their quarterback change, they are really in the condition to be straight in their wheelhouse. Only had, I believe, 80 passing yards against Iowa State. Maybe not even that. It might have been 60, somewhere in there.
No, 62 and 2
that's
picks.
That's what I thought. With 2 picks, and they still were able to make that a 3-point game. So for BYU, they're going to have their work cut out for them. And Tyler, that is why, for the first time on this show, I am going with the upset warning. I'm busting out the flag, Tyler. We've got an upset warning in Orlando. BYU is officially in trouble in my book. I like UCF to win this game. Vegas does as well. They're a 1.5-point favorite. I think this is one of those, the dam finally breaks. It was going to happen to some undefeated team. UCF needs a gelling point. They need a come-together type of win. I think this is the week the Knights get it done.
Okay, this might be a little bit too deep of a cut for this type of show, but sounded awfully like Big Game Boomer here. I don't know if I'm buying. I don't know if I'm buying this. I know Vegas, hey, they got big buildings for a reason. I get it. But I think is what everybody's falling trap for. And you mentioned it rightfully so. UCF made the change offensively. Really exploded against Iowa State, especially on that ground game. You look at Iowa State and say, wow, they're a great run defense, and look what UCF was able to do. The problem with that is, you guys any coach, it is so tough to prepare for a new quarterback, especially one who's very mobile and can do some things, pair that with a good running back, when you haven't seen him on film. Now you've got some film to work with, and you could take a week, if you're BYU, to analyze, okay, here's why they were successful against Iowa State. You know, they did some not trickeration, but, you know, you put some new things out there. Iowa State kind of just had to read and react, and that's tough to do sometimes. And we're able to hang off one. Plus, Iowa State made that game a little closer than it needed to be, right? Those turnovers, they put themselves in a bad spot, let UCF control that thing, and had to make the heroic comeback. I don't think BYU does that to themselves, especially after the scare in Provo. Yeah. I think they give themselves an opportunity to come out fast and take control of this game, which might negate some of that explosive running for UCF. And I don't buy the upset alert. That's where I'm not buying it yet. I'm just not. You got a couple days to convince me, but I don't think I'm buying it, Cade.
Yeah, well, to me, the interesting thing, you mentioned the turnovers. Jake Retzloff, quarterback for BYU, averages an interception a game. He always is good enough for that one. Sometimes he'll have multiple. We'll see if that happens, if that trend continues. I'm betting on it does happen. I think BYU, they're going to play a great game. I don't think they're going to come in and get immediately blown out or anything. I don't think it's going to be like that 45-3 UCF Oklahoma State game last year. I don't think it's that type of territory. I think it's a UCF finds a way to shock some people, maybe a 35-28 type of deal where it's one of those weird, okay, UCF has the bounces going their way, because that's what they did last year. And that's what Gus Malzahn teams do. They have their close near upset, and then they have their random upset they spring on someone, because Gus Malzahn is always good for one weird win a year like that, where he springs an upset on you and you can't do anything but just be like, okay, you just kind of have to accept that this is going to happen today. UCF's going to do this. And I think that is what's going to happen this Saturday. I really
Can't
do.
blame me for trusting Vegas. I really can't. Big buildings again for a reason. Those guys know what they're doing. We're just amateurs by comparison.
Absolutely. But it's time to get to the best of the rest, Tyler. The final 4 games to talk about. And the first one, a Friday night fun one. Boise State and UNLV, two of the best teams in the group of 5. Boise State, a 3-point favorite in this one. It's a late night game on CBS Sports, but if you stay up for it, you are going to be entertained. These are two great offenses. UNLV, the go-go offense. Obviously, if you followed us, if you followed anyone for covering college football this year, you've heard about UNLV and their fun story. 6-1, can put points on anyone, can give up a lot of points as well at times. Some of the past few games they've done that. And Boise State, need I say more? Ashton Jeanty, that's really all you need to know. 17 touchdowns, 126 carries, and 1,248 yards. That's just dumb, Tyler. That is video game level dumb.
Yeah, it's a great season for a lot of players, and he's done it, halfway through a year, essentially. That's remarkable.
I mean, just I have no other words for him. It's just Ashton Jeanty. That's all you need to say about Boise State. They're a team that they've been controlling a lot of people, just not boat racing at times when you think about it. 62-30, you go, well, they gave up 30. But it doesn't matter when you score 62 on Utah State. They were able to breeze by Wazoo. Their only loss was to Oregon, which Oregon's the number 1 team in the country. So that's nowhere near a bad loss territory. Boise State has really become that favorite to get that playoff bid. I think the only team really in their way in the Mountain West would be UNLV. And so we're going to find out a whole lot about these teams. It's going to be the main question. Can UNLV slow Jeanty down enough? Because you're not stopping him. It's not happening. It's, can you slow him down? And as weird as it is to say, Tyler, can you hold him to maybe only 150? Not let him get to that 200 or 250, or maybe bust out a near record 300 type of deal like you maybe be able to do on NCAA 25. But can you hold him to somewhere between 125 and 150 might be the key there.
Yeah, because it feels like he has the capability to go for 300 in this game, just because UNLV's defense, is not the best, and with the tempo they play at, that could hurt him as well. So, man, this should be a fun game to watch no matter the result, because either you're going to see Ashton Jeanty go absolutely bonkers, or you're going to see two teams try to seize their opportunity to say, hey, we are the top, non-powered team. We deserve that playoff spot.
Absolutely. I feel like this could be a first to 50 wins type of game. And with these two offenses, I think Boise will get there. I don't know if UNLV will have the ability to do it, because I trust Boise's defense a lot more than I do UNLV's. I'm going with the Broncos to get the job done in Vegas.
Yeah, I think so. I think Boise seizes that opportunity, that grasp, to say, hey, only loss is number 1 team in the country. Good luck trying to dethrone us as the best non-Power 5 team.
And then
or P4, I should say. I keep saying Power 5. Apologies, Pac-12.
Yeah, rest in peace, Pac-12, until it comes back. But, rest in peace for now.
It's on its way. Well, yeah, we'll see.
It's on its way. But the next game to get to, one we already talked about if you watch the Upset Alert segment, that is Penn State and Wisconsin, the Saturday night game on NBC. Penn State 6.5-point favorites there. Tyler, we've already talked about this a little bit. Camp Randall, great environment at night, makes it even better. But this is a battle-tested Penn State team. They've had some of those tough opponents to deal with. Illinois, USC on the road, going to the Coliseum. They're Penn State's weapons. Can't talk about them enough. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, amazing running backs. Tyler Warren, a fantastic tight end, coming off that 17-catch game and then a bye week after that. Penn State should be rested for this one. It's just, can Wisconsin get back to playing some of that type of football you're used to? Can Tawi Walker go off, make a big play or two, and allow Wisconsin to just slow this thing down, keep that time of possession in their favor, and allow Wisconsin to play some good old-fashioned Big Ten football.
Yeah, and yeah, I just we talked about it a bit. It feels like it's a trap but not trap game for Penn State. I think they've found their way through some tight situations, and I think they won't be shocked by this environment. That's where I'm kind of leaning on it. Do think Wisconsin has the ingredients to really make it interesting, but I'm liking Penn State in this game.
And that's where I'm at. I think Wisconsin's been playing a lot better. Their defense has definitely showed up, but they've shut down Purdue, which was expected, Northwestern, which you can do. The only big stunner on that was going to Rutgers and blowing them out. That's not looking as good now with Rutgers getting beat by UCLA.
Mhm.
So I think, like you said, Penn State, battle-tested team. They're not going to be too shocked by this environment. I like Penn State. I don't think they get caught looking ahead. They hold on and beat Wisconsin. The next one to get to, the one we've already had disagreements about just a little bit, Tyler. BYU and UCF. UCF 1.5 point favorites in this one. I've already given my spiel, but I'll give it again. UCF, an amazing run first team. RJ Harvey, he will score on you. It will happen. You just have to accept that it's going to happen. I think the switch to Ja'Cory Brown at quarterback provides a challenge for BYU, having to deal with a lot more of that read option concept, a lot more of which point are you going to have to try to attack here? Do you go after Harvey? Do you go after Brown? You make the wrong decision. It's a 50-yard run down the field, and it's at the bounce house. It's an afternoon game. BYU's a lot better at night than they are at afternoon and earlier in the day. I think the Big 12, it's one of those kind of written rules almost, or unwritten rules, I guess, Tyler. You don't go undefeated in the Big 12. It does not happen. You will find a way to lose to someone. Gus Malzahn's always due for one big upset a year as a coach, and I think this is the week it happens. I like UCF to get the job done.
If you do go undefeated in the Big 12, I think the punishment might be what happened to TCU and Georgia. So maybe that's the, the deal there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which is crazy because
But
TCU did not go undefeated that year. They lost to K-State in the Big 12 title game, which is crazy to think about. But
right. But waiting around, again, that's hey, you go deep in the playoffs, you show up as a Big 12 team. No, you get punished by Georgia. That's maybe the deal there. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. Because you feel like somebody's gonna make it out of the Big 12. That would be fascinating. Cade, we could have, as a side note, could have 3 one-loss Big 12 teams.
Very well could.
At the end of the year. Oh man, it's gonna get nuts for that college football playoff ranking. That first one's gonna be crazy. Anyways, but to this game, you've heard me disagree on this. I think BYU refocuses right after the scare against Oklahoma State. I think it's had they not had that scare against Oklahoma State, I'd be on board with this. But I think they look at the film, they take away Brown and basically tell RJ Harvey, okay, if you're going to beat us, it's going to be all you. You're getting no help. You're going to have to run for 200 yards.
And I can definitely see that. What I'm also worrying about for BYU is how much did that win impact you? Do you come in a little bit hungover from that game knowing, hey, we just had an amazing win at home. We were able to take care of that. There you saw what happened when they went on the road at Baylor, came out with a strong first quarter, battled the rest of the game, but really didn't go anywhere, kept going nowhere. Baylor rallied back. You had a bye week that allowed you to regroup, beat up Arizona. And that Baylor game was coming off the huge K-State win. And then we saw that BYU struggled a bit on the road there, took their foot off the gas. You can't do that against UCF. You absolutely cannot do that because they will find a way to hang around and make your life miserable. And I think that's what happens in this one. Would not be shocked if BYU looks good early, struggles late. No outcome would surprise me in this game. It just feels like one of those classic Big 12, anything's possible. This could be 3-0. This could be 56-49. You could tell me whatever score in this one and I'd believe it. But I think UCF at the end of the day gets the job done. But we've got one final game to look at, Tyler, and that is Washington and Indiana. Now you're thinking, well, this is a Big Ten Network game. This is the early game. This is where game day's at this week. Indiana continues to be the story in college football for a little bit longer. That's what happens when you beat Nebraska 56-7 and you're 7-0 and you're a 6.5 point favorite with your backup quarterback starting. No Curtis Rourke expected this week with his thumb injury. It will be Taven Jackson getting the reps here. He gets to be QB1 for the Hoosiers. And Tyler, I don't know if that really makes that big of a difference for Indiana. As crazy as that is to say, I think
He looked
Washington.
good last week.
He did. He looked great last week. 7 for 8, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he played with a QBR of 99.9. I mean, we're just talking ridiculous stuff. In Washington, it's been the story of the year for them. They're just too inconsistent of a team. They're still trying to find their footing in game number 8. And you never want to be in that type of position where they look good a week, they look bad a week. They look good, they look bad. You can't figure out which Washington you're going to get. They are coming off a bye week. They've had time to prepare for this. But I think Indiana, with all the momentum behind them, they get the job done again.
Yeah, I just, even with the backup, you feel good about where Indiana's at. They're rolling in a lot of, ways, whether it be defensively, offensively, special teams, doesn't matter. And Washington just may not have the horses to compete in that environment, right? Um, Maybe make it interesting for just a little bit. But yeah, I really like Indiana continue to roll on and give themselves a real shot in a couple weeks to announce themselves potentially against Ohio State. We'll see. Um, they got to get past this Washington team. Then you got the Michigan battles at state, at home against Michigan. I think this is just another notch in the belt on the way to the horseshoe, if you will, for Indiana.
Yeah, they're kind of becoming, I don't want to say the main character of college football, but in a way they kind of are. Everyone's going to rally around them and continue to see how their story progresses. It's crazy to think about that everyone's going to rally around Indiana and Vanderbilt and Army, Navy teams like that. It's just one of those weird years for Washington. I think if you can get Jackson in a little bit of a funk, you have the ability to maybe make some things difficult, hang around for a little bit and see what happens. But I don't think it's going to happen. This is a Washington team that, like I said, I don't trust them. I just have no faith in Washington. Then again, the last time I said that, they beat Michigan, so who knows there. But I think we've learned that was more about Michigan than it was about Washington. I think Indiana, I favor them a lot more than I do Michigan this year. I like Indiana to roll still. It may not be, to the tune of putting 40 or 50 on the board. It might be a, 31-7, 31-10 type of deal. But I still think Indiana gets to that 8-0 record.
You say everybody's going to rally around Indiana if you're out there watching and you're for some reason an Indiana hater, like just in general.
If you're not a Purdue fan, let's put that caveat in there because I understand Purdue hating
yes.
Indiana. I get that
right.
one.
Yes.
But if you're
just
not
like for Indiana, let us know why. How'd they wrong you? How'd they wrong you?
And they might be a James Madison fan wanting Kurt Signetti back. To be fair, that I could see that. But
okay.
So there are two exceptions.
Yeah.
But other than that, I actually would like to see if someone did not like Indiana and was not a Purdue or James Madison fan at this point. But either way, Tyler, that will wrap things up for this week. Should be a great week 9 of the college football season. As always, folks, like I said at the beginning of the video, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to always be notified when new videos come out, and leave a comment down below. We always like to hear your opinions. Now, what do you think we got right, we got wrong? What other games do you think are going to be fun this week? A whole lot of good stuff going on for week number 9. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.